This project, Back to the Park at Cranbourne Place, is about revitalising a park designed in the late 1960s. To give context to the park, it essentially is a gateway to a major approach into Cranbourne Activity Centre in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. This particular park, there were ongoing trader, community and police concerns about the park and what was occurring inside the park. There were recognised limited number of legitimate users of the park, and there were known crime and antisocial behaviour concerns, particularly around drinking in a public place, general loitering and associated issues of vandalism and similar. And in its most extremes, there were issues of assaults occurring within the park. Now, this project is about the use of environmental design, but looking at it from a crime prevention point of view, and ultimately it's about improving the visual amenity and ultimately bringing legitimate users back to the park. It's to restore the park to its first intended purposes, for it to be a focal point for the surrounding residents, businesses and the broader community. Now, we all work in a political environment, whether we work in local government or state, and we often have solutions forced upon us. But we often don't ask ourselves, what was the actual problem? This grant was an opportunity for us to explore the actual problem. Now, before we get into the actual problem, I'd like to take you on a bit of a ride around how we got to choosing Cranbourne Place as the location. A very large municipality, why did we pick Cranbourne Place Park? There was a need, there was evidence, and there was support for the project. So taking you through that process, what we did was we met internally. We met with various parts of council. It wasn't just the Community Safety Department that was looking at this. We met with infrastructure, we met with strategic planning, we met with leisure services, landscape, and look, there's a myriad of names of different departments that you would work with. And we spoke to each and every department and essentially looked at three criteria loosely. Was there previous community safety concerns at that location? What were the vandalism and graffiti statistics of that location over a 12-month period? And what were the strategic plans for the area and capital works commitments for those locations? So we identified three locations. From that, we then met with our local Casey Police, with the local inspector, and showed him and his staff the three locations. What we were trying to do there is identify, from the police point of view, which one would have the greatest impact. It also gave us an opportunity to look at the crime statistics that bounded those particular areas. And interestingly, from both the internal consultation and the police consultation, it was clear that Cranbourne Place Park was an area that required some consideration. So what we did then was convene a meeting internally. So we've identified the location, we convened a meeting to seek the support for the project from the wider organisation. So that this was before the application was even written. This was to ensure that at the point of potentially receiving the funds, we had buy-in from the organisation and that the internal departments were able to organise themselves should we be successful. From that point, what we did was we conducted a crime prevention through environmental design audit. The Victoria Police Crime Prevention Officer for our division completed a SEPTED audit together with various parts of council. We met on site and looked at some of the security vulnerabilities of the park, what potentially was enabling crime. From that, we were able to develop an evidence base of looking at some of the applications of environmental design. Now, in the decision making around what we would do in this particular park, we looked at sustainability. What would be the most sustainable response? Now, the question that was raised regularly was, what will be the impact on the response? So if you receive the funds, what impact will that have on your budgets and your resources going into the future? Now, I need to say this from the outset, that this particular project did not use CCTV or surveillance equipment, as it wasn't going to provide a holistic or sustainable solution. This is not to say that CCTV isn't effective in crime prevention, it's just that in this instance, the decision was made that it wasn't the most appropriate, nor were we willing as an organisation to commit to surveillance equipment maintenance ongoing for what would be considered a relatively small part of a larger municipality. So hopefully I can demystify some of the technical jargon around SEPTED and provide, I guess, a practitioner's point of view with some practical examples of environmental design improvements. Now, the first one is around territorial reinforcement. There was no signage, whether there was limited signage to the park. Cranbourne is a growth area and we're forever having new residents moving into the area. They would be going shopping and they may not even know that a park existed there. So it was an unknown facility. Unless you'd been living there since the 1960s and you'd gone out and ventured out, you may actually not even know that it was a park. So given the locality, a very practical measure was to erect, and this is what's currently being coordinated, is to erect a celebrated entrance to draw legitimate users into the park, remembering that our objective was to bring further legitimate users back into this particular park. The second element is around access control. Now, what we will be doing is including defined pathways, as there is no significant defined pathways within the park for access and egress out of the park. Given that this park is a linkage point to a strip of shops and transport networks, the defined paths will invite legitimate movement within the park and increase movement predictors, providing that confidence to move from, say, Cranbourne Station through the park into the transport hubs. The second slide talks about natural surveillance. Essentially, this park was built on a mound. So the typography of the actual location is something like this. And this was of real concern, particularly from police, as you couldn't be seen from South Gippsland Highway. So what was happening is that police potentially were called out to this particular park. They'd go out to the park. They'd not only have to stop at the park, they'd have to get out of the vehicles. And what made matters worse is that the trees and the foliage further obstructed and concealed activity. So the issue about the planting and the types of species that were planted. So what are some of the actions here? What will be occurring is the trimming of trees and in some cases the replanting of appropriate species of plants and trees. The other thing is about flattening the topography of the area by excavating the land. It's amazing what an impact it can have by actually being seen from all parts of the park and also from roadways. So this is essentially to increase natural surveillance. This third slide is about maintenance and placement. Now, we've been spending significant amount of costs around graffiti removal, arson and general vandalism to some of our facilities. These facilities being things like gazebos, street furniture, barbecues and that sort of thing. And a lot of that was because of poor placement. What wasn't fully used and fully activated is the fact that we're bounded by a strip of shops to the right. But currently, there is no connection between the park and those strip of shops. So what will we be doing? We'll be redesigning the park to have that sense of active frontage that Peter spoke about, that will facilitate the activation and movement between the park and the shopping area, encouraging those simple things like families coming out to eat at the park or tradespeople stopping to have their lunch at the park. So these are essentially three examples of where the funding is being used. Certainly this isn't the whole project, but just three practical examples of its use in the public safety infrastructure grant that we've received. So I guess now that we've explored the need and that there is evidence, we've looked at the SEPTED methods. Now I'd like to take some time to focus around the mechanics of the making it happen, the grant implementation aspects of the project. First and foremost, given that environmental design involves a number of departments within the organisation, the first thing that was organised was a project control group. This is about good governance and about good project management, ensuring that we meet the requirements of Department of Justice. But what it also does is create that sense of cohesion and ongoing support from other parts of council, ensuring that good governance, good management, but also that we all know what often within organisations, particularly large organisations, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. just ensures that movement of information. The second element of the project is the master plan consultation. Currently today, I have staff down at the Cranbourne Centro facility, down at the shopping centre there, exhibiting the improvements to the Cranbourne Place Park, actually with the actual designs, information leaflets, and it's not only the community safety staff, but members of the project control group, and also elements of the Cranbourne Police that also are being involved. And you might say, well, geez, that's a lot of work. Why are you doing it? What we're trying to do is raise the awareness and bring the community on the journey, letting them know that we care, and ultimately bringing them back to the park. As you'll note, there's a number of mechanical type activities that need to occur, particularly, say, detailed designs, briefs, tender of works, those sorts of things. But one thing that is probably not fully considered in the application is that the security infrastructure improvements need to be done in collaboration with community ownership concepts. Security infrastructure alone may reduce the crime, potentially, but it will have limited impact on perceptions of safety. And that's one of the things that we reinforced in our application. So how are we doing it? Through some very basic and simple things. We're having barbecues with the user groups and those bounding the park before the construction of works and also after the construction of works. We're engaging the local traders early in the piece and selling the benefits to them and their businesses so that everybody's on board even before the security infrastructure works come in, and ultimately bringing those people back to the park. You've been listening to me for the last 10-15 minutes discussing a project at Casey. The question you're going to ask yourselves is, well, what's in it for me? How could you potentially adapt or use elements of this project to a successful application in your area through the use of good crime prevention through environmental design principles? The first thing that I'd suggest is to look at asking the question of what is the problem? Consult internally. It's amazing what you'll find out from other departments. Consult police, get their perspectives, collect the evidence, get the statistical information to back up your application. Does the solution address the problem? Like I said before, we're often forced into going into solution mode. The potential way of avoiding that is to conduct a crime prevention through environmental design audit of the particular area that you're keen to receive funding from. The other point to make is the project sustainable? Not just about the security infrastructure itself, but the importance of engaging the community in the improvements and creating that sense of community ownership. And fourthly, is the project in line with Council's strategic plans? What we've found at our end is that the public safety infrastructure grants have meant that Council has considered further longer-term commitments to this particular park through additional capital works funds. Now, what that does is that, yes, the funding will address some of the issues around crime prevention through environmental design, but what this also does is that it increases the need for community involvement and that sense that the park is a gateway into the Cranbourne CBD. One of probably the most important things of this particular grant has been raising the profile of safer design, and more generally, and probably more specifically in relation to crime prevention through environmental design. What we have found is that various departments within the organisation, although they're aware of the design guidelines, sometimes the practicalities get left behind. So what is happening is that people are now questioning, have we considered SEPTED in the design of this new park, particularly because we're a growth municipality? Have we considered in the revitalisation of Park X or Building X, have we considered SEPTED? So what a $250,000 grant has done for us is that it's raised the profile of safer design and crime prevention through environmental design more generally.